Hello, I'm Africa 54 Managing Editor Vincent McCory in for What? It's Thursday, August 17th. This is Africa 54. More than 60 people are feared dead after a boat carrying mostly Senegalese migrants capsizes off the coast of Cape Verde. Military chiefs from ECOWAS are meeting in Ghana to discuss a potential military intervention in response to the coup in Niger. And drifting sandstorms are threatening the existence of the Somali coastal town of Hobyo. We'll have a report. All this and more coming up on Africa 54. At least 60 Senegalese migrants are feared dead after a Spanish fishing vessel rescued a boat off Cape Verde that originally had more than 100 people aboard. Migrants are continuing to make perilous journeys by boat from West Africa in search of better opportunities in Europe. For those who survive events like this and return home, what happens next? VOA's Anthony Labruto has more.
More than 60 people are feared dead after a boat carrying mostly Senegalese migrants capsized off the coast of Cape Verde, according to the International Organization for Migration. 38 people were rescued, including 4 children aged 12 to 16. A statement from the Senegalese Foreign Affairs Ministry said the boat had left Senegal on July 10th with 101 passengers aboard. Cape Verde's Minister of Health says the international community needs to do more.
It comes with a lot of pain, yes, but we know that migration issues are global issues which require international cooperation, a lot of discussion and global strategy. Given what the world is going through right now with migration issues, it means that we all the nations, have to sit down at the table and see what we can do so that we don't lose more lives at sea above all.
West African migrants, mostly young men aged 18 to 35, are persistent in trying to get to Europe for better jobs and education. But survivors of an event like this often end up right back where they started. Alioune Fall hopes to change that. As president of Sama Chance, a migrant reintegration organization in Senegal, he is one of the first people that would-be migrants encounter once they come back to Senegal.
All the migrants we help are young people between 25 or 30, 34 or 14. They don't have a job, they don't have any qualification to do something.
The Atlantic migration route West Africa to the Canary Islands, typically used by those trying to reach continental Europe, is one of the world's deadliest, with summer being the busiest period of travel. Anthony Labruto, VOA News, Washington.
Well, the start of the rainy season in Sudan and neighboring Chad is making it difficult to deliver aid to refugees who escaped Sudan's war. Henry Wilkins looks at some of the logistical challenges faced by those trying to deliver aid and talks to experts about how Sudan's failed planting season means a desperate food emergency could likely get even worse.
Mohamed Khamis fled western Darfur, where rights groups say atrocities against civilians are taking place, around 2 months ago. He arrived in Adamaur, Chad, close to the Sudan border, where he thought he would be safe.
Initially, upon my arrival, there was a sense of security and safety. However, after the floods, homes were inundated and there is a severe scarcity of food.
وفي الأكل أكل ده 3 جرعة بس قاعدين بدونا باقي أكلات ما مكملة صابون ما في سكر ما في وملح ما في.
Sudan and Chad's rainy season peaks in August and September. It's making access to Adamaur very difficult for aid groups. VOA was only able to reach the refugee site in these amphibious all-terrain vehicles operated by the UN. Conventional vehicles like this truck carrying food aid to Adamaur become stuck in thick mud. Attempts to rescue them unsuccessful. Ibrahim Mohamed Abdallah, a refugee who arrived 2 weeks ago, says the isolation in Adamaur makes him frightened.
You have no security there. You know, we have not remained there alone. And even we are friends totally. That's why we also came to the border of Chad. I need help. I don't want to stay there because here is also, it's very dangerous with my children.
Lack of access is not the only problem the rainy season brings. Humanitarians say its arrival also marks a grim milestone for Sudan.
For much of Sudan, the planting season is over. All along the River Nile would be the planting season for much of the country's staples. So the situation in Sudan is such that we have a problem today that will be much bigger tomorrow.
Khartoum and its surrounding area, which sits at the confluence of the Blue and White Nile rivers, has been rocked by fighting between the Sudanese military and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, making it almost impossible for farmers to plant. To add to his woes, members of Mohammed Khamis's family are still unaccounted for. He does not know if they were able to escape Sudan, if they are alive or dead.
Specifically my aunts and brothers. We have been unable to locate.
For the refugees of Adamor, the unfolding tragedy, at least for the moment, has no end in sight. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Adamor, Chad.
Well, to West Africa now, where ECOWAS is facing a crisis as they appear to be running out of options and time to restore democratic rule in Niger after soldiers ousted President Mohamed Bazoum last month. The West African bloc is ready to intervene militarily in Niger should diplomatic efforts to reverse a coup there fail, a senior official told army chiefs who are meeting in Ghana Thursday. ECOWAS says it has started the activation of the standby force for the restoration of constitutional order in the Republic of Niger, and the regional bloc says the meeting in Accra to finalize plans for deploying the force. Now, Thursday's discussions follow an insurgent attack in which Niger's military junta says at least 17 of its soldiers were killed. Junta leaders have said deposing President Mohamed Bazoum was necessary to respond to violence by Islamic extremists. While Niger's coup leaders are also striking a defiant tone and repeatedly affirming their resolution to stand firm and fight if necessary. They're also calling on young Nigerians to be ready to defend the country. Some of the youth say they will heed the call. For more on what is at stake for the youth of Niger, I'm joined by Jamila Lamino, a young African Leaders Initiative Fellow from Niger. Welcome to Africa 54, Jamila.
Welcome.
Now, this coup happened when you were here, but you've been in touch and in contact with the youth of Niger. We've seen, of course, some of them kind of show support for the coup. How accurate is that a great number of young people in Niger are in support of the coup?
In Niger, most of the young people feel like they are pushed aside from decision in a high level. And I think there is a way for them to just take power over the situation, to say that our voice still means something, and we can maybe in a certain way make our voice be heard, and so that we can be associated in the decision for the next few years that's gonna come. So it's not like they are taking position, it's just like they want to have their, they want to be here. And it's the most important part. For example, the institution with whom I'm working is one of them that are trying to empower young adults, like ladies with young girls in STEM, especially in coding. And it's one of the work that we're doing to help them empower and know that their decision means something.
Yeah, so this is very critical. You're saying all they want is to be heard. They want to be heard even at this time. But then we have seen some of those who seem to be, protesting against the French influence, but at the same time holding flags of the Russians. Is there a kind of a sense in which they're thinking that Russia could be a better solution or better option?
You ask some people to take decision between something that they used to and something new.
Yes.
So it's kind of tricky to have like a position to be held. It's more like we don't want to be with you, so the alternative, we're gonna be with other. It doesn't mean that they are with them. It's more like they are trying to find a solution because they feel like they are under pressure. And I think it's important to remember that as a youth, as a young people, a future leader, it's important for us to have all the card in heart to make like the right decision. It's not about just there is that transition part where you just feel like you need to have space to make the right decision. And I think we are in that part where we feel like we need to have enough space to make the right decision.
And they want as many options as possible.
Yes.
But right now, as we speak, ECOWAS is threatening to use force in Niger if they do not restore the civilian leader. What are the concerns of especially the younger people, the women, the men, but especially the young people as we speak?
We want to have space to make our own decision. I think that's a major thing that's coming back.
What does that mean?
Have the space.
But how do you have the space? I mean, now we have the military junta. It's getting support of the youth. Is that the space, or what? How do you define that? What is it the young people want?
For instance, you can have people who feel like having other people from outside telling that we're going to have military action to give you space. It's not the solution for us, because we're in the country and we feel like they don't give us the power that we are supposed to have to make our own decision. It's felt like we have to be aligned with something because there is this way and that way that have different position. But we want to have the space to have our own position and to say, look, we stand for the country.
Some people would say that space would have been an election, which Mohamed Bazoum was elected in an election. What would be the other option here?
Trying to take in consideration the opinion of the youth, and the youth always feel like their opinion doesn't matter, and that's why I'm always coming back to that. It's important to just hear the youth, listen to them, and that's the part of the work that we're doing on daily basis. We're trying to remind that they have the power, because in Niger we have like more than half of the population is youth, is under 30. So it's a huge population that feel like their opinion are not taken in consideration. And that's how I think.
You know what I get out of this? The youth of Niger want the space to make decisions, and they want their voice to be heard.
Yes.
That's really a critical thing. Thank you very much, Jamila, for joining us today. Jamila Lamino is a Yali Fellow from Niger. Now, in response to the recent clashes between government forces and the Fano militia in the Amhara region, the Ethiopian government has announced a state of emergency in that area. An explosion in northwestern Ethiopia has resulted in the deaths of at least 26 people. That's according to local reports. VOA Pondiho spoke to Robel Alemu, Director of Communications for the Amhara Association of America, to gain insight into the unfolding events.
Essentially, what's happening in Ethiopia right now is that there's been a devastating war waged by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and his ruling Oromo Prosperity Party against the country's Amhara region. And unfortunately, following weeks of actually anti-government protests in April 2023, the government decided to send his federal army forces to essentially pursue so-called extremist forces. But this actually led to fighting between the Fano, which are essentially freedom fighters with private arms, and the federal forces. But actually, we're now seeing use of or deployment of other forces, such as the Oromo Liberation Army, as well as the Tigray People's Liberation Front. And this comes at the heels of the 2-year civil war in northern Ethiopia, which was also very devastating. And so just in recent days, we saw the use of drones being deployed and actually bombing civilians in Finote Selam. There was other bombings in neighboring cities, including Debre Berhan, and scores of civilians have been killed.
Rebel, your concerns are valid, but there are people who say, for example, that this guy in power has to have a hold on to the security forces. You can't just let people run around with guns shooting at each other. As the prime minister of that country, as the person in charge of taking that country to the next level, he has the mandate for example, to make sure that every citizen in that country is protected. There are these people who have said that some of these people who are picking up arms or getting arms are lawless leaders. They have defied every other order. How do you respond to that?
I think it's important for people really to educate themselves about what Fano is, because Fano are not militias. So this isn't a rebel group that's come up to
for some political purpose. These are everyday men and women who have actually taken up private arms as freedom fighters during times of self-defense. So when the region is invaded, when their homelands are invaded, they've had this tradition that goes back many centuries, maybe millennia, to very ancient times. And so I think what's happening here is that there is this idea that Abiy wants to stabilize the country. But as I said, there was this genocide that actually was enabled by federal forces. In some cases, the federal forces not only failed to protect citizens, but they were actually complicit in the targeting of communities. And the Amhara region, unfortunately, is one of the most targeted, has been one of the most targeted regions with multiple invasions. You have apartheid being institutionalized in Ethiopia, where people, for example, for their Amhara identity, were unable to even enter their capital city of Addis Ababa. And this was on top of ethnic cleansing in the capital city.
You talked about the issue of genocide. That's a big word. We usually don't use the word genocide unless if there is like empirical evidence, something that you can point to and say this was done on this date. It has numbers or figures to it. From what you're suggesting, that a genocide has been committed against the people of Amhara. Do you have any evidence to support those allegations?
Absolutely. Our organization, the Amhara Association of America, has a group of human rights experts on the ground in Ethiopia, which has been documenting these human rights violations for the last 3 years. And there were other independent groups that have actually tracked these human rights violations going back decades. We don't need to actually see all of these mass civilian atrocities which are unfolding as we speak in the Amhara region, whether it's the tanks, the shelling, the drone strikes, whatever the case might be.
Well, Robert Alemu, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Well, the Voice of America has made several attempts to reach the government spokesperson for a reaction to these allegations of genocide in the Amhara region, but our calls were not returned, and we'll keep trying. Now, that was VOA Pondio speaking to Robel Alemu, Director of Communications for the Amhara Association of America. Now, former President Donald Trump and 18 others have been charged by the Fulton County, Georgia District Attorney in an indictment that accuses Trump and his colleagues of trying to overturn the 2020 presidential election. It is Trump's fourth indictment this year. Georgetown Associate Professor of Government Hans Noel tells VOA's Carol Van Dam via Skype that this indictment, which includes a total of 41 counts, 13 against Trump, is more expensive than the others. Rather expansive than the others.
It's not a indictment about misuse of campaign funds or something, as the New York case was. It's not even about sort of suggesting people storm the Capitol where there's a sort of indirect did he lead it or not, and did he encourage other people to do something. This is specifically tampering with the election, conspiring with others to tamper with the election. And there's a recording of him speaking on the phone, saying the things that he is that are said to be the problem. It also brings in a lot of other people, and so it is sort of connects more to the idea that I think a lot of people have had that it isn't just Trump doing this by himself, but that there's a number of people he is working with that have been sort of acting in concert in this direction. That's what people have been accusing him of, sort of in the press and so forth for a while, and now it's in the indictment.
So it seems to be like in size too, just a lot bigger. I think they said this is 90 pages, and in previous indictments there has been talk of co-conspirators, but they were not named. This time they're named and they're indicted. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so it says a lot about the sort of scope of the wrongdoing. It's not, Trump stumbled onto something, he said something a little bit inappropriate. One of the defenses that you've heard him say is, he believes that this is what happened and it's just about free speech. But this isn't just about him. It's now about a sort of a team of people who are working together with him under his direction, presumably, to commit the crimes that he's accused of. And so it's a much bigger deal. And it's something that loops in all the other parts of the investigation, and then presumably means that the prosecution can look at those different connections and use one to find evidence and leverage on another and so forth.
And this is a foreign audience, and they may not understand the distinction between this is the Fulton County, Georgia District Attorney. How does that play compared to these other indictments that have gone before?
Right. Well, so in a couple of ways. And first of all, the United States is a federal system, and so we've got judicial systems at the federal level. That's the case that was brought, the most previous one, and then there's also that there was a federal case being tried in Washington D.C. Other cases are of that sort. This is the state, and so he doesn't have his position as president doesn't have any particular involvement in what's going on at the state level. So first of all, some question about whether or not the president could pardon himself or anything like that is just off the table entirely. It also means that the rules are a little bit different, and one notable rule is that federal cases are never televised. Cases in Georgia can be. As I understand it, we still don't know for sure what's going to be decided, but it could be. And so that, of course, would change the dynamics of anything that's held inside the case.
Well, that's Hans Knoll, Associate Professor of Government at Georgetown University and author of the book Political Ideologies and Political Parties in America. He was speaking with my colleague, Cara Van Dam, in Washington. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, sandstorms are burying buildings in a Somali coastal town. We'll have a report. Stay with us.
We joined many of our youth across the continent in celebrating the completion of their secondary school education over the summer. But as they set their sights on their next academic adventure, there looms the ever-rising cost of pursuing higher education, both at home and abroad. On this week's episode of Our Voices, we'll shed light on the pressing issue of the rising cost of higher education. We will hear expert opinions and explore innovative solutions to accessing quality education. Join the conversation each week, right here on Our Voices.
Well, in other news, Safaricom's M-Pesa mobile money service is now online in Ethiopia. It's a major boost to the Kenyan telecoms operator as it seeks to jumpstart growth in one of Africa's biggest economies. Safaricom introduced M-Pesa in Kenya in 2007. The service is also offered in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Egypt, Ghana, Kenya, Lesotho, Mozambique, and Tanzania. The death toll in Libya has risen to at least 45 people killed this week in clashes between rival militias in Tripoli, according to medical authorities. The battles are between the influential 444 Brigade and Al-Radar, two of the myriad of militias that have vied for power since the overthrow of longtime dictator Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. And Jimmy Jerizia, considered to be Haiti's most powerful gang leader, warns that he will fight any international force deployed to the Caribbean country if it commits any abuses. Prime Minister Ariel Henry is pushing for the deployment of a foreign force to help fight powerful gangs that are estimated to control 80% of Port-au-Prince. Now, residents of Hobyo, Somalia, say drifting sandstorms are burying their homes, schools and shops and threatening the existence of the coastal town. Abdul Qadir Zubair and Abdul Aziz Osman have this story, narrated by Salim Solomon.
Residents of Hobyo, Somalia, say sandstorms are swallowing part of their town, making it disappear before their eyes. Osman Ahmed Abdullah, the mayor of the town of about 11,000 people, says the sandstorms are driven by climate change, but deforestation and drought also play a role.
You were looking at how the main road coming from Galkayo is closed. A lot of drifting sand is coming from there. There are many neighborhoods that have been buried by the sandstorm. There are many houses that have been buried here. You were looking at that house as an example.
In the north-central Mudug region of Somalia, Hobyo was once a center for piracy that spiked in 2009-2010. However, in recent years, Hobyo has become one of the most climate-vulnerable towns in Somalia, and many people have been displaced. Hobyo resident Ali Aden Abdullah says the sand buried homes, shops, and schools and forced people to move.
Half of the population had already fled as the sandstorm spread everywhere in the town. Now the sand is reaching the walls of the main hospital and the state house, and both could be buried if it's not stopped.
The sandstorms in Hobyo and the recurring droughts serve as stark reminders of the urgent need to address the effects of climate change and protect vulnerable communities, advocates say. During a visit to Somalia in April, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres acknowledged the disproportionate impact of climate change on the Somali people.
Although Somalia makes virtually no contribution to climate change, the Somalis are among the greatest victims. Nearly 5 million people are experiencing high levels of acute food insecurity. And of course, rising prices make matters worse.
To combat climate change, Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud launched a $10 million initiative last month. However, Abdullah, the mayor of Hobyo, says that urgent action is needed and his town cannot wait for long-term initiatives to take effect. He specifically called on people from Hobyo living abroad to return and contribute to saving the town.
Anyone who can bring us ideas, can support us financially, should take part in saving the environment. Anyone who can build houses is welcome, because more houses will reduce the drifting sand. So the people of Hobyo are welcome to come back.
Somalia's president launched an initiative called Regreening Somalia in October 2022 with the aim of expediting reforestation efforts and combating desertification. Somalia's government has also set the ambitious goal of achieving 30% forest cover by 2030 through agroforestry and sustainable land management. For Abdul Qadir Zubair in Hobyo, Somalia, and Abdulaziz Osman, Salim Salman, VOA News.
Well, now, coming up in tomorrow's entertainment report, Sierra Leone's Telemu Komunson performs the song Ghost Trees for a live studio audience on Heather Maxwell's Music Time in Africa.
The two of us didn't know we'd be doing this, but we were made for this.
Well, that was Telem and Common Sounds, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.